Continue.
So one of the, as I was saying, one of the first stories I ever heard about Blacksburg involved your father.
Yeah, the Greeks festival.
Come down to the Greeks, which we did. And then the other thing I remember about the Greeks, maybe as well as anything, you were there all the time.
Well,
when we would come after our son was born, which was close to the time that your daughter was
Right.
born. We used to come as a treat because we were just young and didn't have any money and want to go someplace to get out of the house. And the Greeks, we could come down there, we could get a cheese omelet. I think I would get a cheese omelet. Janice would get a cheese omelet, which had 3 eggs.
Right,
And we
absolutely.
had our son, who was 2 years old,
Right.
3 years old, and you would make him a 1-egg omelet. So he had this. So he would get a 1-egg omelet. Now when he got a little older and he was more vocal, he would ask for like a 10-egg omelet. But that was a real treat. Our night out at the Greeks to go.
Right. Right.
And your dad was always there at the cash register.
Oh, never left it. Yeah, never. My mother was always behind me at the road. Never left.
Yeah.
I want to touch a little bit too on the alcohol thing.
Okay.
And this is the negative part of our business. The good news was that he acquired an alcohol license to sell beer and wine off premises. But at the same time, it was known as a military school. And Virginia Tech declared all of the Corps cadets off limits to the restaurant.
Really?
Didn't specify off limits as far as alcohol goes, and that was the intent. But it was off limits, and when students heard off limits, they were not allowed to go there.
Sure.
So if you wanted to buy beer, wine to go, definitely you were not allowed to come in your uniform. And if you were a civilian, you would come in and buy all to go. So the negative part was that a lot of people assumed it was just off limits, but they didn't know why. You follow me?
Uh-huh.
So we had to fight that stigma for about 20-some years, maybe a little longer than that. And the reason I mention that is that when I was admitted to Virginia Tech in the fall of 1958, I was in the Corps of Cadets. Well, I did not stay in the Corps very long, or Tech, because of business. My first meeting with the company commander in F Company, one of the first things it says, all the do's and don'ts that we need to do as rats, that the Greeks, or the blue ribbon is off limits. So I'm looking at my buddy, John Brown, you know John, insurance business. I said, what am I going to do? So I said, talk to the company commander. I did. And he says, rat, Mr. Kappas, whatever. I can help you. So you're going to have to see General Devine, who was the commandant of cadets.
So they're saying you can't go to your
I
own
can't go to
father's
dad's restaurant.
Your own father's
It's off
place
limits.
of business. Yeah.
I can't go to my dad's restaurant, but it was part of the regulations. And General Devine didn't know what to do. So he sends me to Dr. Newman, Walter Newman, the president of the university. It reminded me of the time that my dad took off his apron and went to see the president of the university that acquired a beer and wine license. So I go in my white belt, scared to death, in Burrs Hall. The secretary says, son, can I help? I says, I want to see the president. I want to see the president. I says, son, what can I do for you? I said, sir, I'd like to ask permission to go into my dad's restaurant downtown. He says, what restaurant? He says, the Blue Ribbon at Greeks. Says, Dr. Newman looked up, says, are you Nick's son? Newman dad, what? Says, of course you can go into your dad's restaurant. What in the world? So that's how that happened, because I was affected by the off-limits
Yeah.
thing. But he had the only license in town for many, many years, from 1930 to about the late 60s, we opened up a cellar.
So the cadets were not part of your business at all?
Absolutely not.
Now, what was
Now,
that?
the civilians, we had a lot of civilians on the GI Bill.
Yeah,
They came to school here. Thank God whoever did that.
yeah,
Saved a lot of students. Yeah, the civilians were out.
that makes sense, yeah.
That's bad. That's it on the alcohol part.
So in terms of restaurants in town, was the College Inn?
Oh, absolutely. The College Inn, owned by Mr. and Mrs. Smith, very, very good friends of my dad. That was what is known now as, what is Joe? No, what is it known now?
Yeah, it's like something
Yeah,
like
it's
Joe's.
still there, it's still
Yeah.
there. Up the street was the bus stop, which is now the Hokie House, because we had the bus stop up there, going from West Virginia to Roanoke, whatever. That was a restaurant called the Bus Stop. And further up was the Sports Center, which is now Mike's Grill.
Huh?
Cecil's was way out of town, where Food Line is now, well, for where 7-Eleven is across from Food
North
Line.
Main.
That was Cecil's. There was Meredith's Diner, where Souvlaki is now. There was a diner there, they tore down the building, and they tore down the diner and built.
I've seen pictures of
on
that.
Draper,
Yeah.
on Draper and College
It
Avenue.
was like a train car. or something.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, exactly, it was, no diner, no train diner. Trying to think of other restaurants. But mostly downtown, that was it. That was it. But I remember, particularly the College Inn is the most wonderful people you ever will meet.
Yeah, they were still operating there when we got here.
And basically the menu was the same as everybody. They didn't, we didn't have that many ethnics in town, and the university was small. Hot dogs, hamburgers, French fries.
Did you sell meal tickets?
At the old restaurant, we sold meal tickets at a discount. So if you bought a $5 meal ticket, maybe, or a $10 meal ticket, you may have had $1 or $2. You saved it.
Uh-huh.
You know, if you were a regular, you remember that.
Yeah.
You'd come in and my dad would punch off the numbers, you know. It was great growing up in Blacksburg. Like I say, we all had some problems, but
When did you start working in the restaurant?
right out of school. Family called. In the meantime, and definitely I should mention this because it was part of it was the family. After Mother and I came over from Greece, sometimes in the 50s, Dad brought over my mother's sister, Anna Havelos. You remember Anna?
I did, yeah.
And over a period of short time, she married Jim Havelos from Marion, Virginia. And he was in the restaurant business. So when Anna and Jim got married, my dad brought him into the restaurant. So we had the Kappas family, the Havelos family, which were inseparable. You know, she was my aunt. And Jim was a great chef, great cook. And that's when you probably came into town. And later on, Jim suggested, when we did the cellar, that he'd bring his brother and his wife in to manage the downstairs part, the cellar. And that's what happened. There was Sam and Dina Havelos that came in. So we had 3 families living off upstairs, downstairs restaurants.
Uh-huh.
And in 1971, we came down on College Avenue and Draper Road and opened up another restaurant in the basement, which was managed by John and Mary Drutzelis from Christiansburg, that owned a restaurant, the Palace Restaurant in Christiansburg, and they managed that restaurant for us. Initially, we called it the Mediterranean, sort of a high-end restaurant, but we were so far ahead of our time, it was pathetic. And we realized that it just was not going to work after about a year or two. So we switched it to the motif of the old solid restaurant, called it Greeks 2. And that stayed in business with the family from Christian. We married John Richellis for about 10 years. And then we faded that out. And in 1980, plus I opened up Souvlaki on Draper and College Avenue by myself. Most of the family had gone their separate ways by then. Deaths, one thing or another. But there was 3 Greek families eventually. But basically the core of the Greeks was the Havelos and the Kappas. And
This was your father that brought everybody
This is my father
by
that
building
brought-
a
this is my
successful
father.
business here.
Yeah. And you know, ethics sort of stuck together a little bit. That was always the case, whether you were Italian or whether you were Spanish or whatever. But then later on, Jim and Anna, their son, came into the business and managed the old Greeks too. And then we had a tragedy. His name is George. He got hurt in a car accident, left him paralyzed from the chest down. You remember this?
I do, yeah.
And it just sort of disintegrated everything.
Yeah.
And he died a couple of years later. So it was sort of a double death
Yeah.
for the family, and very, very tragic.
Well,
Only child.
That really happened at a time when the restaurant business was changing a
Well,
lot
changing.
too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But
Now, did you work in the restaurant when you were a child growing up?
oh yeah, did everything.
So you go,
I mean, let me tell you, I don't know how smart I was, or dumb I was, but I remember I could not reach the kitchen sink to wash pots, so I made me a little footstool. So I could stand on the footstool so I could reach into the sink. But, you know, but I grew up here in the late 50s and 60s where most of my dad's help and Jim's help, back in the were from the black community. And blacks were not allowed to come and eat in the front of the restaurant.
right.
And my dad, before Jim had come in, built a little place in the back of the restaurant with 2 or 3 tables where the blacks would come in and eat. It's one of the biggest disgraces I think we've ever had in this country. It was tough. We had the black school, or high school in Christian, called Christianburg Institute.
Mhm.
But
So you got here when you were age 9 when you got here. You started in first grade.
right, and then I jumped a couple of grades as I went on.
Yeah. So you caught up.
Well, no, not really. I'm still older than my classmates.
Yeah.
I didn't catch up as far. I should have jumped 2 more grades to catch up. So I'm about a year and a half, 2 years older than my classmates. And it was tough going to grade school downtown. It was tough.
Well, I would think here you get here, you got this man who's your father that you had never met, and then you got a restaurant business that you didn't know anything about.
Well, we sort of grew up in it, so we developed some knack for it.
Yeah.
But the thing I want to tell you was that you learn to become independent. At recesses, when I was in 1st, 2nd, or 3rd grade, at recess, I did not want to go out and play with the rest of the kids because they made fun of me. Like I said before, my accent. And I would go into this assistant principal's office, Mrs. Beeks, matter of fact. We named the grade school after her.
Right.
Wonderful lady. And I would go in there. She got to know me. She says, "Chris, why are you doing this?" Speaks. I don't want to go outside. They pick on me, and I had fights and everything. She stood up and came around the desk. Says, got me by the shoulder. Says, "You going to go out there and play with your classmates? And if they pick on you and they fight you, you're going to fight them back."
Oh.
I've never forgotten that.
Yeah.
And some of those kids, are my best friends.
Yeah.
I grew up with them. But you learn how to defend yourself.
Yeah.
Name of the game.
Yeah.
You got to be independent.
Yeah, it's still, it just really is so incredible to me to think about that experience. First, your father
Absolutely.
at 13.
That's right.
I couldn't have done, I mean,
Who
at
could?
13,
Who could?
13 years old.
But they did. Not only the Greeks, but the Italians. A lot of Europeans that came over, they had to do it. They, New York. I mean, how else was this country going to be built?
How would you know at 13 how to get to Pennsylvania?
I have enough figures. I did.
How to get to...
And I wish I'd have done this with my dad, like I'm doing it with you. I would go up on, sort of on Sundays we wouldn't work, and I would go up there and enjoy a Sunday afternoon and watch football games with my dad, and he would tell me all this, but I never thought about taking a tape recorder and putting it down on tape. He had tremendous memories, tremendous memories, especially when we were there during the war. No communications at all, whether we were living or whatever, other than maybe wires from the State Department. And after we got here, the tragedy in Greece was after World War II was that there was a Greek Civil War between the underground forces and the government forces, and eventually the underground forces were communists in the Soviet bloc. And if it wasn't for Harry Truman and the Marshall Plan, Greece would now be coming out of the Eastern Bloc, like Albania and Czechoslovakia and all that. To this day, I remember at the old Greek restaurant as a child, my father had a picture of Harry Truman and Franklin Delano Roosevelt behind the counter.
Yeah.
And to him, they were the saviors of Greece, not only Europe, of Greece, because the Marshall Plan just... but during the Civil War, Anna, my aunt who came here later, and then Alexandra, my other aunt, were caught up with my grandmother, were caught up in the Greek Civil War. And it's horrendous what they went through. But everything turned out fine.
So do you have many memories about living in Greece?
As a child?
Yeah. You and your mom?
I have memories 4 up to 5 years old. The Italians or the Germans invading our villages, burning our houses, going from mountainside to mountainside or from cave to cave. Refugees. We just didn't know what, and I remember the noise, the bombing. I remember airplanes dropping leaflets, maybe of food. And I remember below my grandmother's house, where the central part of the village was, beatings of the town elders because they were maybe stashing arms that the Italians wanted, the Germans. Greece ended starvation in 1941, if I'm correct. Between 350 to 400,000 people in Greece died of starvation because the Axis powers came in and raped the land.
Yeah.
Just got livestock, everything. What they couldn't eat, they burnt. So a lot of Greeks died of starvation. I remember having a little bloated stomach as a child. I don't know how we survived.
It's amazing.
We survived it by my mother, my aunts, my grandmother. My grandmother was a widower. We made it. I don't want anybody ever knocking this country.
Yeah.
Nobody knocks this country.
Right.
Not in front of me. Don't record that. Anyway, that's a little short history. Maybe we'll continue it sometimes, if you like.
Yeah, this is terrific.
As more memories come by, we can do some more if you like. There's a lot to be told.
Well, the thing that is so important, I think, is to think about the anchor that the Creek's restaurant
Yeah.
was for so many years in Blacksburg.
Not only that, Tom, but he came here for a better life, not to make an investment at Brush Mountain or anything, just so his family could live. And then during the war and after the war, not only my dad as a Greek immigrant, but all these immigrants that were here sent all this money over there to Europe to help their families.
Right, yeah,
You follow me?
yeah,
It wasn't about what they can do themselves here. It was about the family.
yeah.
And that's what my father impressed me with it. Even though he was 13 years old when he came over, and he had family over there, but he helped. On my mother's side, he helped.
Well, you got to have something inside. I mean, I don't know that I would have known that I should have helped my family or something. I mean, you got to have something. It seems to me that's really separates you in terms of your character and developing your own beliefs and being able to, in a sense, raise yourself, what your father did, and be able to and know that you should take care of others and to have that kind of.
Well, that's the way we grew up.
Yeah.
That's the way we grew up. It's not that you neglect your family. Nobody neglects their family, but you sort of take care of each other.
Well, my point is though that your father was by himself, and he knew that. He didn't have somebody teaching him that.
No.
I mean, he taught you that, and you taught your children, your family, but he didn't have anybody teaching him that. But he knew it. He had that in him.
That has always been I've always said that Baba in Greek, I say, post-Torkins, how did you do this? To survive.
Yeah, yeah.
To survive.
It's amazing.
Amazing. Okay.
It is amazing. Well,
Thank you.
yeah,
We can't continue sometime.
Yeah.